I was going through my biblical studies and I was going back to the story of David's life. People are watching these movies like Gladiator or, Troy. And you're like, man, that's an awesome movie. It's literally derived and rooted in the word. I'm telling you, like, this is something that when you get into it, it's not like you have to really make yourself read it because it's actually an extremely interesting story.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Today for Tomorrow podcast. I hope you guys are having a fantastic holiday season. How is y'all's holiday going so far?
It's going pretty good so far.
Cool.
Good. Sweets, man, that's my kryptonite. I've been losing the battle.
Losing the battle. Oh my goodness. Well, hope y'all have been having a good holiday season. Today, we kind of want to talk. Well, Mike had a subject. We were kind of talking about biblical characters. We was talking about something a second ago. We'll probably talk about that later. But I want Mike, if you could just kind of give us some context about how you want to go about this discussion.
Yeah. So I was going through my week a couple weeks ago, and I just get these ideas sometimes. They flow through us, and I know we're all reading from the same playbook, so, I might shoot a text. And I was going through my biblical studies, and I was going back to the story of David's life, because I often reference different aspects of his journey because, it's just a very robust life. And one thing that kind of just stood out to me, as of late, like the past few years, is the fact that so many of these biblical stories, I feel, are not told in the context where I put myself on a platter. Like when I was young, I used to hear, turn the other cheek, you got to do this. I didn't resonate with the people that were, especially the men that were holding the flag, because they're speaking from their perspective. And that's why it's so important to where you have to go back to the word, because the word, the scripture, is really just a collection of battles, warriors, generals. Christians are not weak people. Like we're the victors. We're the ones that we guard. Even my name, Saint Michael the Archangel, he cast Satan out of heaven. Like he led the fight. And those are things that I know as a young man, back in the day, I used to wish I would have got this type of information, but now I understand that it's a part of my story. And God allowed things to happen the way it happened, because now I'm so on fire, because it's almost like I'm reading it, I'm so excited about it, and I want to get it out to young people now, or just even other men that grew up in the same era that I grew up in. I just know that, until you go to the source, you're always getting it secondhand. You're always getting it third hand. And that's what we do. We encourage people, word up, go to the word. You have to go to the word. You got to fact check everything that you're hearing. So just to bring it full circle, that's the reason why I thought it would be a good idea, because we need to tell more of these stories in the perspectives that, from an authentic manhood type of perspective.
Yep. You can't base your life decisions on a game of telephone. You can't just, someone told you about the Bible and what they said that God said, and then you just going over what they said because you thought that they got it from the source, but they got it from the other person that they heard it from, who got it from the other person that was at a service that one day. And then now it came back to you, and so now you thinking X, Y, and Z about Jesus, and you basing your whole life off of this information. I know this ain't the subject, but just real quick, like how important that point is. Like you basing your whole life off of this, and you ain't never went to the actual source. That's how we got people talking about vibes and the sun and the moon, and we got people praising plants and trees and Mother Earth and all this other stuff. And it's like, where is that written?
As we talk about David today and how it relates to just real men, go to the Bible and read yourself too. 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel. Boom, you're gonna check out David. But let's get into it, Mike.
That's the beginning of David's life.
Yeah,
that's
he's
like
in a lot.
It's so robust as you go on.
Yeah, exactly. So, but go ahead. I want to take your thunder. I want you to set up. So, what about David resonates with you as you talk about that? I mean, the warrior piece of it, but But let's break that down.
Yeah, let's start from the beginning. Like you said, you know, that first Samuel, immediately, you know, because most people they hear about the story of David and Goliath. Mm-hmm. But, you know, someone like myself I have to go upstream. I need to understand, how did you end up in this situation in the first place? And, you know, David was, I can't recall how many brothers he had. It was a few of them. It was a few of them. And David was almost, on the surface, it almost looked like he had a menial job. Mm-hmm. You know, he was caretaker and the shepherd of sheep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you're like, man, he's not a warrior. You know, his brothers would kind of look down on him like, man, he just take care of the animals, you know. But to me, what stood out is the importance of being where your feet are. The importance of being in these exact moments, because God is trying to give us lessons and tools that we're going to need. And if we are too busy thinking ahead, living in a fantasy world, you know, Dad should have chose me to be in that position. He got me out here with the sheep. He would have missed so many tools that he gained from guarding sheep, because what I didn't realize was, while he was out there, he's battling animals like lions, bears. You know, when they go to attack a flock of his sheep, he's the one that's standing in that gap and killing these animals. Mm-hmm. For you to kill a lion, you got to be a heck of a man
with a staff and a slingshot.
Yeah, so that's my thing. It's like, what type of man is this? First of all, that's the first thing that got my wheels turning. Like, when you say lion, like, you mean like a big dog, or you talking about an actual lion? And so you're like, hold on, this is a little different. So then, even the way he segued into the battle with the David and Goliath situation, he was on another task. He was bringing food and supplies for the actual warriors, supposedly.
How y'all doing out here?
He stumbles upon this situation and was like, you know, it just so happens Goliath steps in and he's calling these guys out. Mm-hmm. Look, basically, y'all afraid, y'all scared, y'all over there. Somebody stand up. And David's kind of looking around like,
why ain't nobody?
What's up with this? Y'all hear this? So, you know, so this is just the beginning. This is like the tip of the iceberg of David. But this is kind of something that really got my wheels turning, because I'm like, man, I always heard of the aftermath of the beginning of the David, even because that's something else I want to give you guys a chance to, because I get riled up. Because it's even the David and Goliath story, they only talk about the beginning part. So after, I'm gonna let you guys chime in, and I want to talk about the end.
So I love that shepherd part, you know, and tending to the sheep. When you say, hey, being where standing where your feet are. I forgot how you term that, but the point is, David didn't go into this like, I want to be king one day. When you look at that beginning, it wasn't anything that showed you that, hey, I want to be king, I'm gonna be over my brothers. He tended to the sheep, and that role and that job, as he was doing it, he probably, at the time, I'm being prepared to be a warrior. It wasn't something that probably came to his mind. I think about our lives, we do stuff, and at the time, I grew up. First job, real job, was cutting grass. I was 11 years old, working for a landscaper, working out in the sun, you know, and he paid us $15 a day. We cut 8 yards a day.
Wow.
So I'm just saying.
High paying job.
High paying job. Not an hour, $15 a day. Okay. So the point is, when I'm doing that job, I'm out there in the sun, I'm like, man, this sucks, but I'm getting my little $15 and all that. Well, and my dad knew this is why he got the job for me in the first place. He's like, you need to learn how to work.
Yeah.
So the payoff was that it made me not be afraid of real work. You follow me? So it's like, cutting grass, being out there and all that was like, sometimes people run from work. I'm like, I enjoy work. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not scared of work. So I'm looking at David. David's out there tending the sheep. He's getting the tools he needs to be the warrior later. That's all.
Yep.
One thing that I thought was interesting, and again, talking about this beginning part, was when the man of God had came and they had all the brothers They, he was talking to Jesse, David's dad.
Because that happened before the Goliath. Go ahead.
Yeah, before the whole situation. So they was all there, and he was picking he's like, it's not this one. No, it's not this one. And then you had one that was like big. He looked like he might be the one. And then they was like, so this has got to be the son. Let me bring this son to you because I know this is going to be the one that you say is going to be the king that's going to lead Israel, right? And then that son comes up and he's like, that's not the one either. Do you have another son? Because I know the Lord had told me that one of your sons is going to be the king. But I'm not seeing him yet. If this, because you have to have another son because what you've presented to me, the Lord has not told me that it was him. He's like, well, I got another one. He out in the field. You talking about David? The one with the sheep?
Yeah.
He's like, bring him. See, David, that's the one. Crazy thing is like, in that situation, it's weird, it's odd. It's interesting to me that one, he was out, he was tending the sheep. He was doing his job. He was in his role, playing his responsibility. His dad didn't think of him as the one that might be the one who might become king. His brothers didn't say, oh, you must be looking for my brother David. But he was the one. And so in this situation, and also leading up to the whole David and Goliath situation, one thing that always stood out to me was the line that he said, and when he came to bring his brother the food and everything when they was at the battle, he was like, this uncircumcised Philistine has come against the army of the Lord. You mean what? And the crazy thing, the key point in that particular statement is this uncircumcised Philistine, because he knew you had to have, again, we're talking about like, things that are in between the line that have to be present. Just like when we talk about Adam and Eve and like who was supposed to tell Eve X, Y, and Z. It's like for him to say that uncircumcised Philistine and to have so much confidence about what he was about to do, it was clear that he knew that there was a covenant that was made with Abraham that said that ain't nobody about to defeat this group. Ain't nobody about to defeat this army. You're not going to rule us. The covenant that was made by our Lord means that he has to have some understanding of our God. He had to be studying it somehow, right? Yeah. So he had this understanding already, and then going into the situation that gave him the boldness. And since he had the experience, he had already fought the lion. Yep. He had already fought the bear. He's like, my God has already shown up for me multiple times in this life, and I was chosen. Yeah.
When you defeat a lion and a bear, any type of man, whether he's a giant or whatever, is not going to shake you, right? And I think this is a great point that I want to kind of piggyback on also, where when I coach, so I'm gonna use a correlation with youth sports. I always try to remind coaches, but especially parents, like, we don't know who's who yet. They'll come in, well, my kid play running back, and my kid is a quarter. Listen, your kid's 9, your kid's 10. He barely tying his shoes correct. Like, we don't know who's who because he may show a little more promise at 10. But if we don't truly develop him and get him to start thinking for himself and digging on what's inside of him to believe that he's going to always, stay on the upper trajectory. What happens is a lot of these kids, they start listening to the people around them.
I'm supposed to be the quarterback.
And they believe what people are telling them, but it goes back to that not going to the source, because you have to teach somebody to how to go to the well sometimes and go to the source. If you just teach them that, hey, just wait for me, I'm gonna throw you a fish every day, and that's what they get trained to do. They're always gonna need some type of verbal affirmation or instruction. I see it all the time, sports, we seen it in the workplace. Some of these kids or young men or young women, when they get in a situation that they don't have a handbook or somebody right over their shoulder telling them what to do, they freeze up like a deer in headlights.
They do.
I see it all the time. And so what's important about that is, just going back to that point, we don't know what's in these kids. We have to try to inspire them and teach them how to understand what's inside of them, because their dreams and aspirations can far outweigh what we have on our mind, And I think back like in my generation where, you know, the previous generation was blue collar. So they told all of us, go to school, get you a corporate job. You didn't know I was supposed to be a very successful entrepreneur. But if you're constantly telling me, no, go to school, get this degree, get this job, and we're so rigid, it goes back to where we're trying to control the outcomes versus just allowing whatever God has put in them to just develop and grow into whatever it is. And we're just really here to keep them inspired and keep, you know, lift them up when they fall, because they're going to fall.
So David knew God had a hand on him when he fought the lion and the bear. He knew that God was the one that rescued from it. And then when you talked about how the Philistine came and he basically was kind of, you know, challenging God. And that's what David was like, whoa, wait a minute. God is the key. And then when you talk about the kids, you know, they come in and people in their ear, like, you're going to be this, you're going to be that, or, you know, at 9 years old, they're not even fully developed. And you think about David, he was about 7, they think about 17 years old at the time. He wasn't necessarily fully developed. He was told he was going to be king by God, Samuel. So he understood that, but he had not yet been prepared for that. And so as the kids come, it's like, who's talking to you? Because if a coach who is trained and know what to look for says that, hey, this is where your strengths are, then that's a qualified individual telling you that, hey, here's where your strengths are. But as you stated, they're so young where you can't really pigeonhole them in one place. You got to kind of see what they gravitate to. Maybe even look at their parents and know they probably got some more growing to do. Because if your parent is 5'7" and your dad weighs 150, at 9 years old, you might be the biggest kid out there.
Yo.
But your ceiling, a good chance your ceiling gonna be that.
Man.
So don't think you're gonna be a linebacker or you're gonna be a defensive end or whatever. You might at best be a DB, you know?
Look, I gotta jump because I see this all the time. And I'm telling you, I try to have the most real conversation with people outside of, you know, just completely deflating their balloon. It's like, listen, you know, like you said, you use a perfect analogy. I'm looking at the father. I'm looking at the brothers, you know, like, 5'7", 160. Put him at linebacker, put him at running back. And I'm like, bro, have you put a tennis racket in his head? Like, give him some art supplies. Like, he might be just be an
might not be the sport for him.
It's not, because
for long term anyway.
That's what I'm saying, because my thing is, we gotta set our kids up for success. Why put them on a road that and not saying that it can't happen. I've seen guys that, going back to your point, it's not necessarily a look. I've seen guys that, to be honest, it's almost more guys that don't look the part have it in them versus the guys that do. We used to call it look like Tarzan, play like James. You show up, you look like Tarzan, but when it gets thick and we're in the trenches, we see the twinkle in your eye. We see you puckering up and you know, you can't perform. You're not playing like Tarzan. And so that's another thing where even if the parent is 6'5", 280, just rip, whatever, it's like, listen, it may not be in them, and that's okay though. This is the most important part, going back to the life of David. It's not for us to try to decide what's in who. That's not our job. Our job is to try to put everyone in positions where their strengths are going to be fully utilized and just keep them encouraged. I think as Christians, that's really what we're here to. We remind each other the words. We didn't create these words. You know, we didn't make up we just remind, hey, brother, stay inspired, you know, keep your head up. You know, we'll say different things, but we don't create them.
One thing that is in the Bible is God he's not basing his decision on how you look. And so it's like, it was so crucial in that point, or in that moment right there when they were like, when Samuel was saying, okay, no. And then Jesse was like, here's the son, right? I mean, this got to be he the biggest, he looked the strongest. I mean, this gotta be the one. Jesse's looking at him and deciding that must be the one based on the way he looks.
Yeah.
God's like, I created him. I know what's in him.
Yeah.
I know who the one is. And so that's not it yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so crazy. That's why I think it's really important that we actually, one, read the word for yourself, but then two, you got to have a personal relationship with God, because you pushing a kid into a particular role. Let's just say this, for example, let's say Jesse was like, nah, David is not going to be it, Samuel, you stupid. And we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that Samuel becomes the king. You give him everything right now. We're going to push him in that direction. Now, in this kind of context, it still doesn't work out because God's plan is what's going to prevail either way. Samuel, the son, he gets put into a position, now he's trying to be something that he was never meant to be.
Yep.
He's being pushed into a role that he was not meant to be in, instead of him being nurtured to be the person that God created him to be in the first place. It's dangerous.
No, it is. And I'm going to let Mike get back here because I know our time, I knew, and we probably going to have to do a part one and two.
We could do 20 parts.
We are. But I want Mike to kind of chime into this too, because Martell kind of set the stage up, and how the fact that God makes a decision, and in using the kids as an example, David had to accept that challenge. So get into the next step, because when Goliath came and the challenge and how David approached it.
So the two words that I was just ruminating on as you guys were talking were humility and obedience. All right, we have to be obedient enough to be where our feet are and complete our tasks that God has assigned us with a great enthusiasm and focus. But we also have to be humble enough to understand that we are where we are. And that's 100% fine. Like, no matter where you find yourself in this life, you can give the best of your ability at that. An old saying we used to say when we were coming up was, show everybody respect, show everybody essence. You could be working at a local fast food place. This is a true story. Matter of fact, I just thought about it. I went into, I think I was in Arizona. I was living in Arizona. I was having one of those days. It was a tough day, and I'm kind of like, man, I was working a lot. I was working at the plant, supervising, and I came into the sub shop. And this young guy was like literally whistling and singing as he was making my sub. And it was so like, it grabbed me to the point where I couldn't ignore it. And I was like, man, I had to take a moment and think like, man, I'm complaining about, my high paying job, that I just left. And this guy that's maybe older than me is literally enjoying what he's doing as he's making my sub. Yeah. And it was just a humbling moment. Like, I had to really just take a moment and just like, man, what am I doing right now? Mm-hmm. So just going back to that, David's life, where if he had not been obedient when he was being trained in the field, with these sheep, he would have never got those tools. Yeah. And so that when the moment came, when he happened to be, when he was destined to be at that point where he met Goliath, he wouldn't be ready for the moment. The moment would be too big. That's another thing that I think is a good reminder for all of us. A blessing too soon is sometimes not a blessing at all.
Yeah.
If you get a big moment and you haven't done the preparation to put yourself in a position to be fully ready to execute in that moment, you can blow some major opportunities, because you only get one chance to make a first impression.
Yeah.
Had he stood in that gap, said, I'll fight Goliath, and he went out there and Goliath stepped up, he ended up tucking his tail or taking a heart, man, I would have defeated the whole, they're like, look what happened to him. We definitely not, you know what I'm saying? The whole story would have been different.
It would have fell apart. And you're absolutely right. And I think with that story, that next step too, when David saw how Goliath was like just slamming God pretty much. Mm-hmm. And one thing too we didn't mention, Goliath did this for 40 days. He stood out there and called him out for 40 days.
Every day.
Okay. And David, like you said, it was God that he was like, wait a minute, you disrespecting God. It wasn't about him defending himself. It was like, he was like, no, we all laid it out. He's like, no, my God can win any battle, so I'm like, y'all ain't going, but I'm going out here to address this,
Another, I know I get on fire about this, but another thing that you just reminded me of, a lot of cinematic movies are derived and rooted in the word. A really good movie is Troy. Brad Pitt. He's literally playing a lot of the characteristics of David. Because just to give it a little bit more context, back in these ancient times, instead of thousands of men getting slaughtered at battle, say, okay, I got all my 1,000 against your 1,000. They say, you know what? You choose one warrior. I'm going to choose my best. You give me your best. And they're going to decide who wins this battle. So a lot of movies, this is going back into how things got twisted. Kids and people are watching these movies like Gladiator or, Troy. And you're like, man, that's an awesome movie. It's literally derived and rooted in the word. But, sadly, some of us haven't even taken the time to really, seek it out and understand.
Well, it starts with reading the Bible, man. And I think I'm glad, because Mike, you kind of came with this thought to actually look at these individuals in the Bible who are real men, real warriors, which a majority of the individuals in the Bible are just that. Because to be a Christian is not to be soft. It's to actually have courage, stand up, and be strong. And when you read the Bible, that's why we keep saying that, you understand that.
Yep.
But when you don't read it, it goes back to what we were saying before. You get in the second hand, third hand, or you see this individual up there standing up there and they doing A, B, C, and D, and you thinking that's a Christian. And a lot of times that might not be a Christian because what they're telling you ain't in line with the word.
Yep.
But to be in this, it's a war. It takes warriors. I mean, to be honest.
It does.
It do. It's not soft at all.
There was a time when the king would lead in battle. There was a time that was a thing. But
David did as king.
Exactly.
And Saul failed as a king in this story. But go ahead.
Speaking of Saul.
Be on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Yep.
Speaking of Saul, another point of that story, before he got out there, he was talking to homeboy Saul.
Who was king at the time.
Who was king at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there was a situation, again, talking about playing the role that you were designed to play. Another aspect of it was Saul in the conversation with David. He's like, you want to go out there? You know what's going on out there, right? And so he's like, well, here, shoot, if you're going to go out there, I understand you hype about this right now. Here's some armor. You can take my armor, bro, because I've gone to battle. This is tested. This is going to help you out in this case. So take my armor and you're going to be good out there. They're like, nah, I'm good. I'm good, homie. I appreciate you, but I'm good on that. And the crazy thing about that situation is because like first off, you're talking to a king, right? The king said, hey, here's my armor. Take it out as you go out there. He's like, no, I'm not doing that. Bold. That's a bold move. Because you can be executed for that.
He tried it on.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel right.
Yeah.
It's not, this ain't the one for me.
Yep.
And so the crazy thing about that situation is because it's like David not only didn't dress up like somebody else to go do what God had trained him to do. He wasn't looking at, the film of Saul in battle beforehand. He wasn't looking at his brothers and, asking like, okay, let's figure this thing out together. He did what he had known that what God had already taught him to do. He's like, I can only go with this. This is what feels right to me. This is what seems right to me based on my experience and the faith that I've had in God. And so he went out there and we all know that he was victorious in that. But it was like, there were so many moments, so many snapshots of faith, of his faith in God throughout this whole story before he even threw it at Goliath. So many points of having faith that he was like so confident. His faith had been built up so much that he could go out there and stand in front of Goliath, bold, and then do exactly what he did. We think in life today, we think that, oh yeah, I'm going to go against Goliath and I'm going to win today. It's like, cool. If you got the faith to do that, fantastic. But you got to understand that faith is built by hearing the word continuously. Faith is built through experience. Faith is built by actually living life and trusting in God so that God can show you that he is your God. He will protect you. He will provide for you. And after that, that's a small step forward. And then the next time you have a little bit more confidence. Okay, God helped me get through. I was about to go bankrupt. He got me through that. Or I was having this issue with my marriage. He got me through that. Or I was having this issue with my sibling and we got through that. So maybe he can get me through this too.
That's actually a really good point. I'm glad you went there with, Saul trying to put his armor on. Because what he's trying to do is get into he's trying to plant those seeds. This is what it's supposed to look like. David was courageous enough to say, you know what? This doesn't feel right. Not only did he not have an armor, he had an unorthodox weapon that he chose. Yeah. They tried to put a sword in his hand, and he's like, no, this is not, it just doesn't feel right. He came with a slingshot. To the point where Goliath was offended. Like, shit, like, come on, dog. Like, you gonna throw rocks at me? What is this guy doing? He's completely underestimating the situation. Mm-hmm. And this is it's a life lesson. Like I always tell my son, he's at the point now where we just had a situation the other day. Matter of fact, I was a little angry because we were moving some equipment and somebody in the distance was kind of like just yelling and screaming. Mm-hmm. And, and we all like alert, like, we watching, we not shook, we not scared, but we alert. We keeping eyes on this, but we keeping eyes on that too. Mm-hmm. My son being young is just coming up in an environment where he hasn't sharpened that skill set because he hasn't had to. Mm-hmm. And, he came in and I was a little angry, I'm not even gonna lie, because not only did I recognize that he didn't recognize the potential seriousness of the situation, but then he was intrigued and he went and he took his brother out there because in my mind, I thought he wanted to just like, hey, it's a guy. And so now you're putting somebody else that we all love in danger. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, listen, man, I got a little sharp with him because I'm like, you have to be able to recognize the situations. When I sat back and I really thought about that situation, instead of putting the onus on him as a kid, I put it back on myself. Mm-hmm. I said, I got to do better to make him aware of the situation. Gotcha. Not to put fear in him because I want him to be bold, but I also want him to understand that we live in a world that is not a nice world. It's just to be honest. It's a lot of people that, mean us harm.
So yeah, I mean, and I remember because it just happened. And Mike and I both saw the same thing. We saw it, and we were like, well, like to Mike's point, he laid it out. And you did, I mean, you addressed your son in a respectful way. I mean, you were strong with him. He understood the seriousness of it. But I understand it too, because I'm glad when you said that, because it's a teachable moment. Mm-hmm. And I think when you look at David and you look at it, the word don't get into those details per se, but what he told, how he was prepared for that battle, showed that he learned from being a shepherd and the faith you talked about. He learned to trust God. He learned that, hey, I got everything I need. And that courage not to take that armor, and saying, hey, this don't fair. This ain't me. This ain't what I use. I need to fight with the weapons that God's given me to fight with, that he's trained me to fight with. Yep. And I know we get to the end here, but I think that's the thing too, is to get out of the story, David, is we got to fight with the weapons that God's given us. Not to your point, trying to look like Saul or the rest of the army or whatever, but like you as an entrepreneur, as all of us up here do our thing, it ain't about trying to look like this dude over here, that person over there. What has God given us to fight with? Mm-hmm. So, but hey, I don't know how we close this out. This is definitely we're gonna have a part 2 today. It might even be part 3 because there's a whole different segment in this. But we're gonna have.
He ain't even got old yet.
No, he ain't got old yet. He ain't became king yet.
I think probably at least 2 parts because
we might.
This is
it's a middle part and an end part.
I think every part is extremely important. It's extremely, and the reason why this is important, the reason why we want to make sure more people are understanding this and hopefully intrigued enough to go to the word themselves is because all of these traits that are shown in these characters of the Bible, we have in us in our everyday lives, all of us. Mm-hmm. Now, different people have more strong temptations in different areas than others. And that's your own personal battles that you have to make your peace with. But these are things that it can happen to anyone. And if we're not aware of, that's going back to being prepared. You have to be aware of something in order to prepare for it, or else it's a blind spot. It's catch you in a blind spot. And that's when you can really be hurt, when something catches you completely off guard. You didn't see the punch coming.
That's the one that knocks you out.
That's the one that knocks you out.
We used to call it stealing on somebody. When I was coming up,
we did.
They catch somebody slipping. That's the one that can knock you out. Though. You gotta always be aware. So this is the reason why we felt like, no, we gotta spend some time and just really unpack. And you can see our enthusiasm. I mean, I'm telling you, like, this is something that when you get into it, it's not like you have to really make yourself read it, because it's actually an extremely interesting story.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Today for Tomorrow podcast. We 100% appreciate you for being here. Go ahead and subscribe if you have not already. I hope you're having a fantastic holiday season. And in this holiday season, it might be a great opportunity to grab some gear. Mike, you got some of that.
Yes, sir. We have merch, people. So come check me out on Instagram at Detroit Investor _WCI. And we have some exciting news on the way too. I don't want to let the cat out the bag just yet, but just please understand that we got some good stuff out right now, but we got some really cool stuff happening. And soon we'll be able to fill you in on it.
Yeah, and look, it's so secret. We don't know yet. We waiting to hear. We excited too.
Yeah,
so
it's coming.
Hey, invite you out to Man 2.0, second Saturday of the month at the Freedom Center. That's at 28202 Franklin Road. Second Saturday of the month, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And then on Sundays, we got service here with Freedom of Christ Ministry, 11:30 a.m., same address. Come check us out, understand what God's doing. This passion we got is about, because we all love the word, and that's what we teach at Freedom in Christ.
Speaking of the word, there's something that's on your website that's about, like, because we're talking about actually reading the Bible. Yeah. Like you listened here, this is great starting point, but it's a starting point. Remember that. Go into it deeper. If anyone's having issues, I know you've got something available for them.
Yep. Actually, if you try to learn, as we talk about the word here, it's like, it's kind of intimidating to study the Bible. I know for me, it was initially like, hey, where do I start? If you want to learn how to go about that process, how to get started, how to study the Bible, we got a resource on our website. Go check it out. It's free, no charge. All you got to do is go there, say you want it, provide the information, and we'll make sure you'll be able to download it and you have it in your possession so you can start that journey.
Yes, sir.
Hey,
yes,
it's
sir.
free.
It's free.
Best price ever. Free. Okay.
Thank you for tuning in, and we hope to see you next week. Peace.